Hello, I'm Luca Gili. I'm currently pursuing a research project here at Vilnius University at the Faculty of Philology. My project is on being in ancient philosophy. When philosophers talk about being, they usually use big words, they um, look very serious and concerned. But being, first and foremost, is a word taken from the Greek language. And if we look at what it means in the early texts written by philosophers, we see something, in a sense, much less pretentious and nevertheless quite difficult to understand. Being is a verb, and it's a very special verb because it appears in what linguists have the habit of calling copular sentences. It connects usually a subject and a predicate, or a clause and a predicate clause. Sometimes it also means existence. Now, Bertrand Russell is famously stating that logicians and philosophers should get rid of being, or the verb to be, when they do philosophy, precisely because of its ambiguity. Because being, according to Russell, may mean either identity, when I say Luca is the person talking to you, or it means predication, like Luca is seated or Luca is talking. It can even mean existence. That doesn't come across very natural in English, but you may say Luca is there, and in this locative qualification given by the word there allows the verb to be to mean existence also in English. In languages like Lithuanian, you have sentences like Dievas yra, which means God exists, but it is said with the third person of the verb to be, not with the verb to exist. And the final meaning of the verb to be, according to Russell, was the subsumption of a lower class into a higher class, as if I were to say cats are animals, or something of this sort. And in order to dispel this ambiguity, Russell was suggesting to go to Frege's logic that really treats functions and arguments, adopts the mathematical terminology of function and argument in order to formalize natural language sentences. Now, in ancient philosophy, there were people who were having an approach similar to Russell's. Among them, we can remember Lycophron, who was a sophist. Aristotle talks about him in passing in his writings. And this sophist argued that precisely because of the ambiguity of the verb to be, you should get rid of it. And so in sentences like the wall is white, you would rather replace is white with an analogous expression like whites, or you would build a verb based on the adjective that figures as the predicate of the predicative sentence. Now, but if we go back to Parmenides, who is probably the very first philosopher who thematized explicitly the verb to be as the object of his philosophy. I mean, we know that Xenophanes also did something of this sort, but we have very few evidence of what his production, philosophical production was. Parmenides writes a lot about being, about to eon. I mean, he wrote in Ionic dialect, so he didn't write to on, which would be being, and the participle of the verb to be in standard Attic Greek. He would use the Ionic dialect, so he would write eon. And there are many ways of interpreting Parmenides to be, depending on the meaning that we attribute to this word, and also depending on whether we interpret this participle as having a verbal function or a noun function, because a participle is called a participle precisely because it sort of shares two natures, the nature of a noun and the nature of a verb. Now, it looks like Parmenides is looking at toeon, at being, with the in verbal context, because sometimes it replaces toeon with the flexed form of the indicative, estin, is. So Parmenides is interested in the verbal aspect of to eon. And what does that mean? Now, today's linguists like Andrea Moro in his A Brief History of To Be, MIT Press, 2018, say that you kind of have a semantic understanding of what to be means before you see it in a sentence. And this would apply, according to Moro, to all Indo-European languages. Earlier research by Charles Kahn, who was the author of The Verb to Be in Ancient Greek, on the other hand, sort of maps the possible meanings of the verb to be in ancient Greek into essentially three different domains. One domain is the domain of predication, so being doesn't have a real meaning other than connecting subject and predicate, and according to Kahn, this is the most fundamental meaning of the verb. Then you have an existential meaning that occurs especially whenever there is a qualification of place. So the cup is there, means that the cup has to exist. And then you have a veridical function, meaning that whenever you say is, you want also to state that wherever you are connected with this verb, you are stating that it really is the way it is. So whenever I say that the cup is on the table, I am asserting that it is true what I'm saying, i.e. that the cup is on the table. Now, in the 70s, a famous scholar of ancient philosophy, Alex Mourelatos, wrote an important book in our field with the title The Route of Parmenides. In this book, he follows the same ideas that were guiding Charles Kahn for his research on the verb to be, and he talks about Parmenides as having a focus on what Mourelatos was calling speculative predication. Parmenides was interested in the way in which we have predication in the scientific context. Whenever you have sentences of the type A is B, where this predication occurs of necessity and is always the case. Now, the question that I ask myself in my project is, what are the qualifications of the verb to be in fragment 8 of the Diels-Krantz edition of Parmenides fragment? What are these qualifications meant to qualify? These qualifications are called semata, signs in Greek, and being is said to be whole, ungenerated, unending, infinite, immobile, and so forth. Mourelatos was seeing all these qualifications as pertaining to the subject. After Mourelatos, other scholars were looking at this qualification as qualifying the implied predicate of a sentence, of which Parmenides was analyzing only the predicative structure by looking at to eon. In my opinion, they have an adverbial function, and they do qualify the way in which the copula, that's the way is, the flexed form of the verb to be, has been called in the Middle Ages, the way in which the copula connects a subject and a predicate. Thank you.